Alright, we're going to be doing Troll Laboratory Level 1 challenge as a troll a second time, this time using a completely different method. Srid mentioned that there were two possible ways of winning, and I certainly wasn't going to stop at just one. I need to find a Pizorf glyph. I took Conjunction. If I wanted to guarantee finding a Pizorf glyph, prepping Binlore would be the better choice. The reason I didn't is, well, with this tile set I kind of really hate Binlore's prep penalty. For some reason the regular floor tiles and the water tiles are very hard to tell apart for me, at least at a glance. So like I'll often think somewhere is open but there's actually water there. And because of that, I just really don't want there to be lots of water in this cave. So I'm quite glad to not have to deal with that. Now, I took Fido here as a way of gaining Corrosive Strike. I could have taken, instead, Martyr Wraps, but this way, by taking Fido, Martyr Wraps can appear in shops, so I can potentially get to Corrosive Strike level 2. I'm not going to be so lucky, but I could have, in theory. My plan is to use my Death Protection to land free Corrosive Strike hits on one of the bosses, and just do that every 6 tiles to gradually make that one boss super corroded, and then just start knocking that boss into the other bosses using Pizorf. And because of the way Pizorf works, that boss's corrosion stacks will also increase the damage dealt indirectly to the secondary Pizorf targets. Now, I didn't start attacking anyone until I uncovered the Blood, the warlock-looking fellow. I had already found 3 other bosses before then, the mouth, the eyes, and the claws, but I didn't start attacking any of them. So, the reason for that is the boss you're using as a cue ball, you really don't want that boss to die before whoever you're knocking her into dies. That would be rather unfortunate, since then you're left with no corrosion on anyone. So, because of that, you need to find someone who's not going to die first, and most of these mini-bosses all have exactly the same health, 476. So you need to pick one that is going to actually be survivable enough to be usable in this way, and there are 2 options for that. One is Trollenstein's Monster, who has much higher health than the others, it's in the 700s, and also has Ensnare, which means that as the primary target of Pizorf, it'll get some free healing with each cast. The other option is the the Blood, who has Crazed Regen, and fully heals with every tile. So that means that the Blood can be used if you regen fight a little between hits. The Blood will be fully healed, and whoever you're trying to knock the Blood into will not, letting the Blood survive. Either of those will work. I basically wanted to pick whichever one I found first, and then get started immediately. Now, normally I've got the nice little troll infinite loop to let me do infinite things, so it would be nice if I could just, punch a Shroud Cow a bunch, get Death Protection infinitely many times, turn each of them into a corrosion, that sort of thing. Unfortunately, that's not going to be an option for us, because we have Corrosive Strike, and we don't really have a way of turning Corrosive Strike off. So if we try to do the loop, our Corrosive Strike will corrode the Shroud Cows too, until eventually the Shroud Cow is dying in one hit, and then can no longer be used. So as long as we have Fido, we can't actually do the loop. So what we're going to do is we're going to get as much corrosion as we can during this initial exploration, and then once we're out of darkness, at that point we'll convert Fido and start using the loop just to get stuff done, despite not having any darkness left to do it with. But because of that, we need to build up as much corrosion as we can while we still can. Wait What is a glyph I really like to see here, because it makes it very quick and easy for us to take two bosses and put them next to each other to use Pizorf with. We are not so lucky. Wait, what doesn't appear, and nor does Jahora Jaheyu. So we're going to have to rely on Pizorf to move the bosses across the map to get to each other. On top of that, the Blood, the boss we've been stacking our corrosion on, is on the far right side of the map. We can't actually push the Blood off the right-hand side of the map. So instead, we're going to have to bring the other monsters to the Blood. I'm going to start using this reanimated troll here, as it's not a proper Shroud Cow, it does way too much damage to us for that. But the weaker monsters aren't useful Shroud Cows due to our shield, and the reanimated troll is good enough in a pinch. I could use that level 2 blue troll instead, which would be weaker and therefore a better Shroud Cow. But the level 2 blue troll is the one I want to use as my Shroud Cow when I'm doing the actual proper infinite loop later on. So because of that, I want to avoid attacking the level 2 at all now, because I don't want to get it at all corroded before we start doing the infinite loop, since I'd like it to be as healthy as possible to make sure I don't kill it. Pushing that troll around for two reasons here. One is I've got nothing more useful to do with my mana, really. The second is I'm breaking walls, which gets me Binlore Piety. Sooner or later, it's probably best to convert out to Earth Mother to get mana refills. And the third reason is I set up a script in advance, and I need my Shroud Cow to be in the bottom left corner, because that's just how I set up my script to work. So once we're in that phase of the game, I want the blue troll to be over there. So that's why I'm pushing it across the map like this. I could just, change the coordinates of my script, but then I'd have to pause the video, and the background music would change, and it would just be an inconvenience. And a corner is a good place to put the Shroud Cow. It guarantees that you know where the shrouded tile is going to be. The opposite corner. No need to worry about anything. Occasionally I forget to actually attack the Blood and pop my death protection because I'm focused on doing other stuff with the level 2s. That's not so good. We didn't get great monsters to bounce off of to get extra shrouds during this phase. We didn't find our martyr wraps. We didn't make the best use of our exploration. We explored not even half the map, but still a non-trivial chunk before we found the Blood to start stacking. Our shop items, in addition to no martyr wraps, also haven't given us any mana items. Nor have they given us really anything usable. What I'm saying is that aside from giving us access to Pizorf, our RNG this run is pretty bad. This is just quite an unlucky run. I'm not getting as much corrosion as I want, I'm not getting as much mana as I want. This is very much going to be an uphill battle. Kind of a bit weird that there can be two Binlore altars down in that basement. I never knew that. There could be two of the same god. I knew the basement ones could match the upstairs gods, but I didn't realize there could be two Binlores in the basement. But I suppose it makes sense, considering prepping conjunction on Curious Vicious Gondolet makes there be two altars of the same kind on the first floor. moving Dr. Trollenstein toward the... or not Dr. Trollenstein, Trollenstein's monster toward the blood. Because, as I said, other monsters gotta come to the blood in order to get killed. At this point, I was having doubts about whether I would even have, you know, enough corrosion applied, that sort of thing, to win this run at all. So because of that, I want to take on Trollenstein's monster first, because it's the beefiest. So I figured if I can't do it, Trollenstein's monster is where it'll first become most obvious most quickly. These are fine items, but none of them really useful to us, except the keg of mana. Having more mana potions is always nice, but like, since this is a level 1 challenge, mage armor is only worth 1 max mana. That's, not too impressive. There are 2 Pizzorfs here. I got one from worshipping Binlor, and only later found the other Pizzorf. If I found the other Pizzorf first, then I could have worshipped Earthmother first instead to get an Imo Wall, which would have made me able to farm Earthmother Piety with help from the loop. Without Imo Wall, I have no way of gaining Earthmother Piety, which means it's going to be more difficult to actually use her clearance boon for more mana. This frozen troll here deals 6 damage to me. I heal 5 damage per explore, thanks to all those conversions I just did. So this frozen troll is now usable as a blood cow. We converted Fido so that we can actually safely do our loop without killing our blood cow. Or shroud cow, I suppose. Hopefully we have enough corrosion already, because we're not getting any more. In theory, Earthmother could give us a little more, but we don't have Imopol, so that's very unwieldy. This is the script coming in. I've established that the loop works, so can have a program do the clicking for me. It's kind of a pain dragging your mouse all the way from one side of the map to the other. So, because of that, I'm very glad I don't have to do it by hand. Now you can see each cycle, Trollenstein's monster's health is going down, but not by a whole lot. We got enough corrosion down to make a regen fighting profit. With 50 corrosion, we're dealing at least 50 damage per Pizzorf, plus a little more from our base attack, so maybe 52. Pizzorf costs 4, so we have to explore 4 tiles to pay for a Pizzorf. Every 4 tiles, a level 10 monster heals 10 damage, so each Pizzorf is effectively dealing 12 net damage. That's not a whole lot compared to Trollenstein's monster's 700 health pool, but our cue ball, the blood, isn't going to die due to crazed regen, and it's not like we're really spending anything on all these mana bar refills, so we're making very slow progress, but we are making progress. And you might say, well, Trollenstein's monster has Ensnare, so every time it takes damage it heals a tile, so because of that it should be healing too much for us to damage it. The reason that's not happening is secondary targets of Pizzorf don't have their Ensnare ability triggered. That's just something about how knockback works. A lot of effects on the secondary target aren't applied. For example, corrosion uses the first target's corrosion, but not the second target's. Ensnare applies to the first target if it has Ensnare, but not the second target if it has Ensnare. That sort of thing. So that's the one reason we're able to actually make progress in this fight against Trollenstein's monster. If it was actually getting super healing from its Ensnares, we would be toast. We'd basically have to scum for Martyr Wraps. Or at least better circumstances. Just checking its health. It's under 300. We're more than halfway there. It's a slow process. Really, what I probably should have done was just reset. We can win this, but it's going to make a much slower video than would otherwise have been necessary. But I do kind of like that this is able to demonstrate that we don't really need luck here. All we needed was Pizzorf. The game didn't give us anything else. Earth Mother's kind of nice. And we could have guaranteed Pizzorf by prepping Binlore. I just didn't because I'm apparently blind? I don't know. Now, Trollenstein's monster is very low, like double-digit health now. This is where we're going to have to start thinking carefully. One of the quirks of Knockback is that it can't kill the secondary target ever. This is very obvious if you've ever played the Labyrinth and had a Minotaur knock you into a wall and leave you with exactly 1 health. They seem to have a fondness for leaving you at exactly 1 health. But because of that, any damage in excess of the Trollenstein's monster's remaining health is going to be wasted. So we really need to deal just the right amount of damage. And then still have enough mana left for a Fireball to finish it off. 9 health, unfortunately, is too much health left for our Fireball to be lethal. So I'm actually doing part of a loop manually here to get just enough mana to do 1 more Pizzorf followed by a Fireball. And that gets us the kill. And now I'm going to finish off this particular cycle of the loop, popping my death protection, before letting the program take over on doing it automatically again. Since the script doesn't know how to do only part of a cycle, it always does attacks in groups of 6 because of death protection. It's just how I set it up. So, that's 1 mini-boss down. Next one. The remaining ones will be a bit faster than Trollenstein's monster because they have smaller health bars, but they have the same regen as Trollenstein's monster and they'll be taking the same damage per hit as Trollenstein's monster, so it will still be a slow fight for each of them. And it'll be pretty much the same slow fight for each of them. So, not a whole lot to talk about. On the other hand, I feel a bit weird about cutting this part of the video out because I'm not really just running the loop. It's not like I'm just farming piety. I'm literally doing boss fights here. It feels really weird to say the boss fights are too boring. I should just cut them out for time. But on the other hand, they are quite repetitive. So instead of focusing on the slowly diminishing health bar of the mouth, I'm going to talk about my other attempts at getting Troll Laboratory Level 1 challenge. Because when Shade of Ox said you can do it at Level 1, and then Srid said you can do it in 2 different ways at Level 1, my immediate reaction was, okay, I'm gonna find a 3rd way, because I just can't be outdone. I did not find a 3rd way. Depending on how you count it. So, here are some various strategies, some of which failed because they don't actually work, some of which failed because they are awful, and various reasons like that. So one variation on the corrosive strike thing was I was hoping to be able to keep my corrosion and just apply it selectively. So the way corrosion works when corrosive monsters are trying to apply it to you is if your damage reduction completely negates the damage that the monster deals to you, then if it negates the monster's base damage, then any corrosion stats that you already have, you won't take damage from those either. You'll still take an additional corrosion stack if this monster is trying to corrode you, but you won't take damage based on the corrosion you already had. So one plan I had was go down to 0 attack power, and then you can run the loop with corrosion on your Shroud Cow. It will take tons and tons of corrosion, but since you're not dealing any damage to it, the corrosion will never actually hurt it, so it will survive. And then you could get infinitely many death protections from the loop, punch Dr. Trollenstein as many times as you want, and eventually get it up to the 1,500 stacks of corrosion needed to kill it in one hit. Which I thought would have been really cool. Alas, there is one slight drawback with this plan, which is it doesn't actually work at all. Turns out that if you deal 0 damage to a corroded monster, the monster still takes damage based on the corrosion stacks it already has. I suppose that makes sense given my experiences in Curious Fishes Gone to Let, but it's not how it works when there's corrosion on the player and you're being hit by a monster. So there's kind of an asymmetry there. Sort of like how knockback works differently for the player than it does for the monsters in some subtle ways. So that foiled that particular plan. My next plan was, okay, what if it's okay if my Shroud Cows get lots of corrosion and die, because I can get infinitely many of them? Which might sound slightly impossible, but there is the Yin-Yang sub-dungeon. Yin and Yang resurrect at full health with all their debuffs removed, one move after you finish them off. So my plan was if I could get the Yin and Yang sub-dungeon, then I could start using them as my Shroud Cows, I would be able to, despite Corrosive Strike, still be able to run my Shroud Cows indefinitely, and that would give me the infinitely many corrosion hits on Trollenstein. There was one slight flaw in this plan, which is, it turns out, well, first of all, Yin and Yang have very high attack power, but that's not actually a problem. Using a more basic loop, we can get arbitrarily high amounts of Earth Mother piety, so I figured we'll start out without Corrosive Strike. We'll do a normal, non-corrosive loop with some other monsters. We'll farm lots of Earth Mother piety, we'll get lots of stacks of Vine Form for lots of damage reduction, and that is what will let us use Yin and Yang as Shroud Cows, and then we'll buy Martyr Wraps in a shop, and we can go from there. That would be super scum heavy, since we'd need both Martyr Wraps in a shop and our sub-dungeon to be Yin and Yang, but it would be technically possible. The second problem I ran into with that approach was it's actually technically impossible because the Yin and Yang sub-dungeon cannot possibly spawn in the east, and Troll Laboratory is an eastern dungeon. So, because of that, this is never an option. I am kind of tempted to try to do that loop in something like Grimm's Grotto, just to show it can be done, but the challenge was to do this in Troll Laboratory, and it does lose a bit of the artistry of it if you're not using your troll to kill the trolls. I just always like that symmetry. Another plan was to use Troll Loop to farm Earth Mother piety to get a zillion plants, and then flood the whole screen with them, kill them, get tons and tons of corrosion, because each plant you kill, once you're at 0 piety, is 5 corrosion punishment. And then, similar to the strategy with the mouth, have one monster knock you into Dr. Trollenstein, and all of your corrosion stacks will be applied. Sort of like we're applying the Blood's corrosion stacks to the eyes right now. Unfortunately, that doesn't work either, because it turns out that that's one of the asymmetries of this game. When you knock back one monster into another, the first monster's corrosion is applied to the second monster. When a monster knocks back you into another monster, your corrosion is not applied as damage to the monster. Now, in retrospect, I can understand why. Even in the base game, a warlord could easily have gotten enough corrosion from Earth Mother, since it doesn't actually take that much or farming to just buy tons and tons of plants from entanglement and then kill them all with your fists. So a warlord could have done the same strategy and that would have been broken. So I'm guessing that particular asymmetry was specifically to prevent exactly the cheese I was trying to do. But it's still a little disconcerting when, like, you think you got this cool plan and then turns out it doesn't work because of a really obscure rule you never knew about. Especially one that seems inconsistent with other rules. But I suppose that in this game, really being inconsistent is the most consistent thing because there's so many asymmetries. If you knock back a monster into another monster instead of into a wall, the damage is reduced by 20%. If a monster knocks back you into another monster instead of into a wall, the damage is halved, not just reduced by 20%. Of course, monster lifesteal and player lifesteal are completely unrelated effects that happen to share a name, and so on and so forth. So, asymmetry is just a fact of life in this game. Corrosion looks like one where it's pretty symmetrical, but there are some subtle differences that can catch you off guard. Let me see, what other approaches did I try? Another was another corrosion strategy, but with no corrosive strike, this time using Earth Mother to farm up to maximum stacks of green blood. Which nobody except Troll could even hope to do. That's about 1500 piety. But Troll actually can, due to the whole limitless black space thing. I actually did multiple attempts at this, and I got very far in them. There are two problems. One is that green blood maxes out at, I believe, 32 stacks of corrosion. We're barely treading water as it is here with the 50 stacks of corrosion on the blood. So we could have done it, it could still be doable with mana items, but 32 is not really a whole lot. But the bigger problem is I'm not very good at this, and I kept dying like more than an hour into the run by doing something stupid, because even though you can farm up to max piety with Earth Mother, it takes about an hour and a half to get all of the stacks of green blood. Especially since you're summoning so many plants, you have to start clearing out statues, and then there's like all these magic immune plants you want to get rid of, so sometimes you convert back to Johor Jaheyu just to clear them out punishment free and then switch back to Earth Mother, and all that stuff. So it runs at the speed of glue, and you can only fail at that so many times before you just go, I don't care anymore. I didn't want to talk about it though because there were some rather interesting moves in that scheme. So the big one is the problem with trying to buy max stacks of green blood with Earth Mother is green blood corrodes all of the monsters on the main dungeon level. That includes your Shroud Cow. Before long, your Shroud Cow is too corroded to survive your attacks, and dies. So at first I was thinking, okay, do I have to like cultivate like a whole group of several Shroud Cows, and like buy vine forms as well, so that I can start using higher level monsters as Shroud Cows once they're corroded? That sort of thing. But that all seemed super unwieldy. The trick I happened upon was green blood only corrodes all monsters on the main dungeon level, or the dungeon level you apply it on, which in this case is the main dungeon level. So monsters in sub-dungeons are unaffected, which means as long as you have your Shroud Cow be in a sub-dungeon, you'll be fine. Your loop won't be interrupted or broken by the green blood. So that was the approach I went with. Good Glenrick is perfect for that, because he has 9 attack power, which is a very usable amount for a Shroud Cow. You can buy a few stacks of Vine Form to get exactly the right defenses to Shroud Cow with him. And being level 6 means he heals very easily. But you don't really want to have to scum for good Glenrick, especially since you also need Earth Mother, but you probably need to scum for Johora Jeheyu because you really need really good mana to have a hope of winning with only 32 stacks of corrosion. That would be a ton of scumming. Luckily, it can be done with level 1 monsters as well, because what you can do is you can get yourself intentionally punished by the Earth Mother to gain corrosion yourself, which will increase the damage they deal to you, which can make level 1 monsters deal enough damage to actually act as Shroud Cows for you, which I thought was really cool. So because of that, you can also use the secret sub-dungeon with 8 level 1 monsters, or you can use the Undead Kennel, which has a level 1 zombie. There are other sub-dungeons that I assume you can use, like, pretty sure there's one in the east with, like, some imps and a sign that says the Underworld is near. I bet that one could be used as well. It would be awkward to script, potentially, because it's just this little 5x5 room, so it would be hard to be sure of exactly where the shrouded tile would have happened, but you could do it if you were careful. That room just didn't happen to show up when I was doing this, whereas I got the room of 8 level 1s and the Undead Kennel multiple times, so those are the two freshest in my mind. So I thought using Corrosion to turn a 3-attack monster, which you can't do the Lesser Infinite with, it's just not good enough, into an 8-attack monster, which you can do the Lesser Infinite with, I thought that was pretty cool. Maybe that's just me, but in particular, that also lets you use the half-dragon, or dragon spawn, in the room with 8 level 1 monsters as your Shroud Cow. If you have Endoswall, that's really good, because Endoswall giving you physical resistance is a murder when you're trying to do one of these consistent loops. Because you'll be using Endoswall to clear out statues, and then you'll forget you have physical resistance, and your first hit from the Shroud Cow will be weaker than expected, so it won't shroud a tile, and then either you need to lose darkness to undo that, or if you were doing a script, you won't react in time, and the script will kill you from continuing to punch the monster as if you'd gotten the tile's worth of healing that you didn't. Now you might say, well, I'd be careful, I wouldn't do something like that, and yeah, maybe you would, I don't know, I said the same thing. I was not careful enough. I died multiple times to that sort of thing. I also died to gardening up a bunch of mushrooms under Johora Jeheyu and forgetting to drink a health potion to cure my poison after. Lots of things like that. And the problem is you can be careful so much of the time, but as I said, it's a 90-minute process between, not just 90 minutes from starting the game to maxing out your green blood, 90 minutes from completely setting up your stable loop, having explored the whole dungeon, and also gotten all of the Johora Jeheyu farming stuff done that you need. 90 minutes from that, from doing all that prep and then starting on Earth Mother, to actually finishing green blood. I like that plan in theory. In practice, it's just a huge pain, and in the end, it's still a corrosion strategy. It's basically just a worse version of what I'm doing right here. My favorite strategy, which is somewhat a joke, is as follows. Bring a Dragon Soul, and then just start Pisorthing stuff into Dr. Trollenstein. Set up a script to do it. You'll deal like 2 damage a hit. Since Trollenstein's the indirect target, he won't die. Or, he won't, excuse me, that's not what I meant at all. He won't trigger his, ensnare, so he'll actually keep the damage. And then your basic mana bar will let you cast, what, 3 Pisorths? You deal 2 damage a Pisorth. Trollenstein has 1500 health. All you really need to do in that case, specifically the monster you want to knock into him, is Trollenstein's monster, whose Shroud will apply as the Ensnare will apply as the primary target, so it'll heal and have infinite health. So you're dealing 2 damage a pop. You have, you need to deal damage this way 750 times in a row. You have enough mana for 3 Pisorths. So all you need to do is have your Dragon Soul give you a mana refund enough times in a row. Oh wait, there's actually things happening I should talk about. I can't regen fight the blood because of crazed regen, so I had to use all my mana potions for that. I could have used Switch to Earth Mother, but I didn't want to. I don't know, just once I realized I could do it without her, I felt like it. And now that all 6 mini-bosses are gone, Trollenstein's down to 1 HP, and is super dead. So, that's the second method. Anyhow, as I was just saying, sort of like a joke strategy, if your Dragon Soul doesn't roll a win enough time, 750 times in a row, just go to your Shroud Cow, do the loop, get your mana back, and try again. And just keep trying until you win, or the heat death of the universe occurs. That's it.